Phillip Lanos, and today we have a CEO by the name of Truong of Aridis Pharmaceuticals. It's on the NASDAQ as ARDS and he has more than 20 years of experience in biopharmaceutical drug development, having held positions of increasing responsibilities in companies which were eventually acquired by larger entities, including Gene Medicine, which was sold to Megabios, Avrion, which was sold to MedImmune, and MedImmune, which was sold to AstraZeneca. So having maintained lifelong interest in infectious diseases, he has focused on researching and developing innovative human monoclonal antibodies and vaccines designed to address life-threatening infections. Vu, how you doing today, man?
Good, Philip. Yeah, great to be with you.
Yeah, man. It's rare that I get the chance to speak to people who are focused on drug development and solving diseases. I've had maybe 3 or 4 people on the show so far. You would make a 5th or a 4th, right? If I do my math right there. And it's always an interesting conversation, from having conversations about we could have prevented the pandemic a lot sooner. There was research, there was information, to the quite opposite in other opinions, right? So it's a really interesting conversation. But I want to start, before we even get into all this, I want to start where I think it makes the most sense to set the tone. And that is, do you come from a family of scientists and pharmacy technicians and entrepreneurs, or is that a path you chose on your own?
Great question. No, didn't come from a family full of scientists, but from a family that had really lofty beginnings. And then, a major event happened, and then having to become poor and requiring hard work and adopting a humble set of expectations. And so there's just there's a lot of layer here in terms of the beginnings, but yes, it mixed somewhere in there is the entrepreneur spirit of my dad, which now passed away. But yes, so it's all kind of tortuous, but here I am in the technical world. But the beginning is not predicted where I am today.
Yeah, no, that's it's always interesting to see where those origins lie, because then at some point you went into school and decided upon the path you were going to take. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't grow up in this country. I grew up in Vietnam, and I emigrated over here because the fall of the country to the communists, and started early, at the age of around 9, and then having to learn English from the very beginning. And
wow.
And you gotta brave through those challenges.
That's a hard time to come into this country at that age, and like still have to learn a whole language and culture, and yeah, I imagine it wasn't easy. So when you made it to college, was that, before college, did you already have the path laid out that you wanted to go into to become a scientist and be in medicine and development of that? Or was it in college that sort of started to unfold for you?
Actually, for me, it actually started a little bit earlier. So that's how I differ from all my siblings. It started in high school, and I always had an interest in science, and participating in science fairs and winning science fairs, and then getting a taste of the intellectual reward, as well as the potential pathway toward a career, and started in high school, and then it continued in college. I selected a college that was predominantly research focused, knowing that I like science. So with me, it definitely differs from all of my siblings, and where in that I like science a little bit earlier than they did.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So that's interesting to then carry into this next portion of the conversation, which is you then launched a career that you were able to see many companies, the way they work, the things they were developing and researching, and sold one after another to another company, and sort of you've got to see this exit or this transition, this acquisition multiple times, at least what the companies looked like before it was happening, after it was happening. Did that sort of give you any sort of education towards informing the work that you do today?
I think it does. I think it certainly gives an idea that if you're on to the right the right area, the right science, and that the company is hardworking and do the right thing, it could lead to a rewarding outcome, could lead to growth, could lead to that gratification, and then from all these exits, it does give you an idea that wait a minute, why not start a company, right? Why not do it yourself? And so yes, there are certainly influences of where from the past, from my past, that shape where I am today.
And were you able to sort of step right into launching Eridis? Like you understood the paperwork necessary, maybe grants you had to apply for, things of that nature. Maybe you had people who you could bring with you into the team immediately, or was it a hailstorm?
Actually, it was. It took a lot of planning, but of course, I had a co-founder that had a lot of executive experience. He happens to be my boss's boss, and we share the same goal of doing something unique. So it started with a good team. It also started with a good idea. Like all company foundation, you really have to have right vision. You have to have a certain core belief in a certain area, and maybe a technology or a product, and plan for good days and bad days, setbacks and minimum minimum expectations of how things can go. So yeah, and I think starting with getting a taste of the success from previous companies that you're with, and kind of understand what larger enterprises that may come in and license your product or technologies, and how they think about it, and understanding how the buyer thinks. Buyer in this case, of course, larger companies or entities that want to take over your enterprise, knowing how they think, and know how to really position what you have. All of that are really part of what I learned from previous exits.
Which was then you were then able to take as learnings into Aridis itself. And let's explore a little bit about what it is you decided Aridis was going to be focused on, and how that's going for you.
Yeah, we my previous two companies that exited successfully, they both share a common facet, and it also shares how we saw Aridis and where it could go. And with the first company, developing a novel way to deliver a vaccine. Typically, when you think of vaccine, you think of it as an injection. And we thought, well, what if you develop a vaccine that can be administered by a simple, painless mist into your nose.
Wow.
Right? Instead of getting a shot with the needles and the pain involved and so on. What if you do that instead? There are clearly would be as certain vaccines and certain segment of the population that would find a painless vaccine experience to be more desirable. These can also be self-administered if need be. You don't need to go. You probably don't need to go in the hospital. And so that company developed the world's first nasal flu vaccine, and it's called FluMist. That kind of bucked the trend, and then the company that acquired it, MedImmune, also kind of bucked the trend and asked the question, well, what if you treat these infections with an antibody instead of the antibiotic that small molecule antibiotic or small molecule antiviral that is a standard of care? Well, what if you use a monoclonal antibody to neutralize a virus, in this case, a respiratory virus? And back then, that has never been done in terms of a product, or had never been commercialized. And a lot of investors didn't believe that was going to be successful, and so the company stuck to its vision, and lo and behold, it got it through product development and essentially commercialized the world's first infectious disease drug that is an antibody to treat a respiratory viral infection. That actually became $1 billion seller.
Yeah, it sounds like it would.
And it was from that product that MedImmune sold itself to AstraZeneca for $15 billion. And so again, the commonality is stick to you have something that's very well grounded in science, and it essentially represent a whole new treatment paradigm. And so that's how we kind of started Eridis. We said that right now you and I get antibiotic when we get a bacterial infection. These are molecules that have been developed over the last 8 decades, and there's over 150 of these that's been produced, and they serve humanity really well. But then we have this untapped potential of your immune system. And when you meet a pathogen, your immune system goes to work in trying to generate a cellular response as well as an antibody response. Well, these are the kind of proteins that act to neutralize the pathogen. And well, that's protecting you and I right now as we sit here in the room talking to each other. We've generated millions of different types of antibodies from all the pathogens that we've exposed in our lifetime. And these can be really potent, can be very effective. Why not use those to fight infection? And that was the question that MedImmune asked originally, and it's successfully got the product to commercialization. So when we founded Eridis, we said antibodies are really untapped. It's like Elon Musk asking the question, well, there's this thing called the sun. Why are we not using the sun?
Right.
As an energy source to drive cars and drive everything that we do that requires energy? Well, there's this thing called the human immune response, human immune system. Why are we not leveraging what it does so well already and use that as a way to fight infection? Well, so actually MedImmune asked that question 25 years ago, before it successfully commercialized that product. Fast forward 25 years later on the COVID time. Well, what are we seeing?
Yeah.
We're seeing a respiratory virus infection, and we're seeing that some patients are being treated with an antibody, right? Remember, President Trump got a treatment of COVID antibody right around this time last year.
Yeah.
And so so when we started the Eridis, we kind of saw that this is an untapped area. This is an area that is poised to have explosive growth, because we are going to transition to a world very soon where if you have evidence of infection, like a fever or whatever, cough and so you're gonna go into a local clinic. They're gonna administer a test, like a COVID test, right? Is administered, and the physician or the nurse are going to get the answer right away within the same afternoon what you're infected with. We're going to be able to pinpoint. We are already able to now pinpoint exactly what's in that sputum of yours that may have caused you the sickness, what's in your blood that may have caused you that infectious disease. And soon the physician's going to want to reach for a drug that knock out just that pathogen and not anything else. What you and I get today is a drug that acts on not only that bacteria, but everything else, including the microbiome, the gut bacteria that you and I need to survive, to maintain good health. And so we're going to transition to what we call an area of precision medicine as it applies to infectious disease. And that's kind of how we started the company. And again, it starts with a vision. That's kind of shaped with a lot of previous experience, how do you go about, crystallizing the idea and then reduce it to practice.
That's what I love about science. It's there's a whole, if you're doing it right, there's a whole paper trail of how you got to where you are today and what you decided to focus on. And it's fascinating to me that some of the more obvious things are not what have been so obvious to people, or what they chose to start working and funding research on, or, solving that problem. You're right. Somebody looked at the sun and said, why not start there for energy? And you did the same thing. Well, the immune system is kind of inherent, does a pretty good job. How can we help it do its job better? And I thought that's what the question that people were asking, but learning what I'm learning here in this conversation with you, most people were like, well, we'll try to look for another element, a chemical or something else somewhere out there that's going to try to do the job. And it just fascinates me that isn't the case.
Exactly. These mega industries, it's like the idea of Facebook, right? Why not create a simple way for people to get together and share their stories, share an easy way to communicate with each other? Seems like it's a simple idea. A lot of time these mega industries starts with very simple ideas, right? Why not? Why haven't we been doing this sort of question, right? And so and biotech, like other industry, are littered with a lot of these kind of stories, right?
It begs the question.
And something like, let's say, Chinese herbal medicine. Here you have these really complex things that the Chinese have been treating themselves for thousands of years, and they have thousands of years worth of data. Although yes, admittedly not controlled clinical data, but clearly, a lot of these works. And why not just take these and find out what the heck is in these components that makes it work? They just separate these and find out what they are. And actually, some of the recent cancer drugs were started that way.
Wow.
So, we live and breathe a lot of things surrounding us that could give us that eureka. Well, why not do this? Why have we been doing this so much more complicated stuff? Why not just focus on this sort of thing? And so
it's really
that's kind of how we founded ourselves, and that's kind of how we think about things.
I think Eridis is on the right track. I'm definitely, it's definitely something that I'm behind in terms of supporting and saying, this is the right method, the right vision to then carry out biotech research with. Let's start there. And I've seen a growing trend over the last maybe 10, 15 years of Eastern and Western medicine, and that idea actually coming together a little bit more too, which is a little, I guess, late to the party, but better late than never, So now where do you want Eridis to go ultimately? Because you're right. The pandemic forced a lot of people to look at health and medicine entirely different. And in some places it's tearing our country apart, literally. And yet The science is there. There's information that's telling you this is how you can help everyone get out of
Yeah.
this and move forward. And we'll get there, I think, eventually. But for Eridis, where does Eridis see itself in 10, 20 years from now?
Yeah, I think I believe that we're really on the cusp of showing that these monoclonal antibodies can work and work really well. And they are superbly safe, right? We've been using these antibiotics, which are small molecules. A lot of these antibiotics are made by one bacteria that are used to fight another bacteria or to help it survive in some way. But you have these antibodies that are naturally produced by your immune system, and so the antibodies that you make can be used to treat me and vice versa safely. So we have
Wow.
this really safe molecule. We have the molecule that acts in a longer time window than these antibiotics. Antibiotics, when you inject them, within hours, half of it is cleared from your system. That's called plasma half-life. Or antibody, if I inject an IgG1 molecule in you, it'll be about 3 to 4 weeks before half of it is clear. And so you have this pool of drug that stays within your body to protect you for a longer time. And we can actually take that same antibody and do some very simple protein manipulation engineering to have that antibody extend the half-life from 3 to 4 weeks to 3 to 4 months.
Oh, wow.
So that means that we can get an antibody out of you and then, copy the gene and engineer so that it will protect you for like a year before you have to give another injection. So you get a lot of these advantages that antibodies can do. So I think where I'd like Eridis to move is, of course, to show in larger data sets and larger sample size for the clinical studies that these are safe and they work really well in terms of clinical outcome, but also to show a health economics benefit, meaning that if you use these drugs, you get these patients cured faster, you can get them out of the hospital a lot faster, and you save the overall spending in the hospital. So where we see ourselves in the next, really, it's not going to be long. I mean, we'll have phase 3 data sometime around mid next year for our first phase 3 asset, and then we'll have a couple of phase 3 in about a year or two after that. And so I think as we begin to show the world that, hey, these will work predictably and they're safe, I think it could open up a whole new area in terms of using antibody to fight infection, or using these precision medicine to treat infection compared to what we're using today, because these drugs are really, really wonderful in that it not only works by, let's say, neutralizing the pathogen, but it also actually calls in the rest of the immune components to fight the infection. So imagine calling your buddies, bringing different types of weapons to fight that pathogen, rather than what you and I use today, whether it be an antiviral or an antibacterial, like an antibiotic. One drug use one mechanism of action. Here with an antibody, you can actually involve multiple mechanisms of action to fight. And so you have this really wonderful potential of a new class of anti-infective that are really, really underexplored.
Yeah, there's definitely implications that this is the future of healthcare, like you said, is precision medicine. And I'm actually personally excited about it. I have many people that are close to me who are autoimmune, like immunocompromised, and you name it, they run the gamut of like constantly facing some kind of health issue. And to know that there is something that can call upon the powers of the entire biostructure of someone and start to address and help heal these ailing portions of ourselves, and especially during a time like right now when people are already, let's say they were already sick, already dealing with something, and then on top of that we throw a pandemic that's just ravaging through America. It's precision medicine that's needed, the exact kind that you've been working on, that you've known about and studied for over 20 plus years, and following that line of questioning and bringing that forward and pushing it forward for the next 10 years, 15 years, moving it forward and saying, I see this being a widely used application. And knowing that there is a company that's out there, it's on the NASDAQ, it's got a lot of funding behind it, a lot of paperwork, and your goal is to bring bigger data sets. There's a lot of promise that this is going to be a realization. And in a system of healthcare like America's, it's helpful to know that at least we'll have medicine that is just A1 grade.
It's coming, Philip. I mean, beauty of this is actually we're not discovering anything new. We are actually not inventing anything new. Aridis is not. We're simply discovering what your body is already doing really well at. We can assist it by protein engineering to make it better, yes, but the core principle of it is something that is within you and I since we walked the earth. Your immune system has been there all along, and so why not harvest it? And so that's all we're really doing. It's not as if we're doing anything earth-shattering in terms of ushering a whole new area of scientific discovery. Is really just looking inward and exploiting what your body's already invented. Just like the ocean, this vast ocean, right? There's so much stuff to discover there. A lot of medicines there, a lot of ways to cure the world of food supply constraints and so on. The solutions are out there. A lot of times, you don't need to call in 150 inventors and noodle it over and come up with something completely new and original. The originality comes from you, and it's there. So it's really cool that way, right?
Yeah, well, I think it takes somebody who's been studying this since they were young. I mean, really young, to be able to respect the information that's already out there and not overlook it because it's simple, because it's there, to say, no, I have enough experience to understand that sometimes the simple is better, and it's a great place to start. And I believe that that's going to be the cause or the main factor for success for Eridis, is that mentality. And I'm sure your founding partners share that same philosophy. Is biotech a difficult undertaking to take as an entrepreneur, to push forward, working with investors and what have you? Is it difficult to manage the day-to-day on top of making sure that you're progressing with the research?
It is. It was so different as an industry than high tech, right? The product development cycle is so much longer for us, fraught with a lot more risk than high tech. In high tech, right, you write an app or you come up with a chip. That development cycle time is probably in the order of a couple of years at most, and you get a product. Here, we're talking about a different time scale, 10, 15 years. And all along the way, you've got to test in humans and make sure that it's safe and it works. And then you have to deal with the regulators that,
compliance.
That and sometimes they can be really, really difficult to predict. So there's a lot of risk. And you're not generating revenues for like a decade or more. And imagine, the patient that you need to show as investors. So it's hard. It's a harder.
Oh wow! It's like entrepreneurship on steroids. Yeah.
Yeah, and so fortunately, when success happened in the pharmaceutical sector or biotech sector,
it's big. Yeah.
It's big. It's huge, right? And it's a long time. It's these software have a couple of years of life cycle, and you got to renew it every time. With product, once you come up with a product, that product could make billions for 15, 20, 25 years, even with some of the genetic threats. And so the reward on the back end is potentially a lot bigger and much more durable. in terms of a time when you can extract value. To get there is the key. To get there, there's a lot of roadkills along the way, right? 90%, if you look at the last 10 years, if you look back 10 years ago, 90% of the biotech startup probably gone, right? They bite the dust. And so for CEOs like me who are in a high risk area of doing innovation and trying to develop first in class of anything sounds really cool and jazzy and boy, impressive. But first in class also means to invest in all kinds of risk, right? So it actually becomes maybe even harder to raise capital for it. So
100%.
it's a marathon for us, and CEOs that can get through all kinds of rough weather along the way are usually the one that can see success at the end, but most of them don't see the success at the end. They may see intermediate success where you take it to a certain demonstration, then maybe the big pharma comes in and out-license it during development, which happens a lot. But if you say, well, how do you measuring success in biotech? It depends on how you define success.
Yeah, you've got to have investors who understand that life cycle, that timeline, and then a team that understands that just because the timeline is that long doesn't mean that you don't have to provide some kind of reporting or what kind of system and process you have in place to ensure that it's a symbiotic relationship for such a high reward, high risk. It sounds intense. It sounds like if you can do biotech, you'll be okay in any other industry.
Well, I'm sure other industry have their own unique set of challenges, which are different for sure. But certainly in biotech, it's not for the faint of heart. If you really want to succeed, you got to have that perseverance. And some of that perseverance, also I'm shaped by that in terms of how I grew up, right? Because, growing up from starting wealthy, and coming here, emigrating here and losing everything and starting from the ground up, learning that you got to persevere, you got to learn one English word at a time, and then and study hard and take nothing for granted. That sort of upbringing kind of also it has been helpful in terms of how I persevere.
That makes sense. That makes sense. It's you quick rewards wasn't something you were expecting ever because you knew it was going to be a hustle.
No, I think quick rewards rare. They do happen for sure, right? But none of us. I'm certainly not good enough to find that and to predict that. If I could, I'd be richer than Elon Musk right now.
Yeah, no, right on. So then I guess I have two questions left. The first one is if people want to learn more directly, where do you want them to go, or what's the call to action? Are you looking for more investors? What is it that people, the listener, can sort of take away from this that you want them to sort of act on?
Well, I think they should ask, if they're interested in infectious disease, ask the question, what's missing in infectious diseases? What's the next big thing? If you're an investor, for example, and who's doing those novel first in class type of thing. Obviously, to find out about our company, just go on our website, www.aridisPharma.com, one word. We have a decent website that kind of walk you through our technology and product offering. But if you're the investor that are looking for 10x or more, then you're probably going to want to look for companies that are engaged in a higher risk type of area, like we are, first in class of something. In infectious diseases, there's a lot of opportunities right now because the investors have really undervalued infectious diseases over the last few decades. And a lot of investors have gravitated to oncology, for example. And seems to make sense, right? We actually fear cancer more than we fear infectious diseases, right? You actually fear getting blood cancers or prostate cancer, whatever. Then you fear getting a flu or or probably even COVID.
Right. Even though that's what's more killing most people right now.
Yeah. So over the years, investor, all of us kind of value cancer more because people that's more fearful, condition.
It's definitely a big word to drop whenever somebody tells it to you. It's definitely never good news.
Yeah, and also we there have been so much antibiotic that have been made over the last many decades, that it's hard to differentiate among them. A lot of them are now reduced to commodity prices, and so when you develop a new anti-infective drug, nobody wants to pay, right? Everyone is saying, "Well, this should be at a commodity price. Why are you charging so much
The
money?"
expectation is, yeah, that's true.
So imagine working in a vertical that takes a really long time to see product commercialization, and then also, facing those price pressure because of how society seems to place value on these class of drugs. As you can see,
it makes the conversation in healthcare difficult too. I can see how that carries over. It's like, whoa, yeah, well, how come it's so expensive this? And interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. I'd like to continue that thread in another conversation. But that being said, let's reiterate. You can go to aridispharma.com. That's ARIDISPHARMA.com. And that should have links to anything that you need to know from whether it's more on the company. So I imagine there may be connections to social media or something on that website too. No.
There should be, yes.
Yeah, and if not, I'm sure before we continue to publish, we'll have a conversation about that. Actually, I just looked. No, so are you active on social media at all, or do you even have the time?
We should, but we're one of those companies that are kind of nose to the lab bench.
I do not blame you.
and do the work, but yes,
first of its kind, first class. Yeah, no, I get it.
So but that website, and it also has information how to reach us.
Oh, perfect. Right on. And now, as we bring things to a close, I have a question I've asked everyone who stopped by the show, and I hope you indulge me, but you're welcome to pass. We talked about this, and that is, if you could have invited anybody to sit side by side with us today, dead or alive, to sort of chat about this topic of, infectious diseases and the technologies and how they're moving forward. Now, there's been opportunity that we didn't even have to invent. It was just there, just nobody focused on it. If you could have invited anybody to talk about that with us today, who would it be and why?
I think I admire some of the high tech founders like Sergey Brin, having a conversation with him, how he started Google and sharing that idea that he had, and the foresight that he had. Guys like Elon Musk, I think they take nothing for granted, and they're humble too. They're good thinkers. So be great to have some of those guys participate in a conversation like this and kind of share common visions and maybe share what aspect about what are a lot of the challenges that have come along the way, and how it relates to ours as well.
Yeah, no, it would be an interesting conversation to hear their take on infectious diseases and the research that MedImmune had, for example, or what you're doing, and just monoclonal antibodies in general as an alternative to antibiotics and whatever else has been out there. Really a fascinating conversation, and I'm glad you went deep on it. I know sometimes it's like, should we go deep and start using terminology? Yes, please do, because anybody who's truly interested in this, they're going to want to hear that. And to be able to share your story and know that you come from a place where nothing was ever taken for granted, and the expectation was hard work was going to be the minimum cost of entry. and to see it pay off by then stepping into an industry that just takes that to the next 10x and say, yeah, hard work is going to be necessary before you see any kind of return. It's poetic, but I wouldn't have anybody else in a role like you and the one that you have facing that without your background. I think your background is a very important background to have in this type of work in biotech, just based off what I learned from you. So I really appreciate the time that you took to sort of share that with us as we listen to that story. I'm sure anyone listening can walk away going, okay, so depending on the industry I choose, either way, it's going to be hard work, but I need to have a scale and an expectation set of what kind of entrepreneur I want to be, what my appetite is, and what do I really care about? Back to the fundamentals of what it means to be an entrepreneur. And that's something that we can take away from this. So Truong, everyone, Aridis Pharmaceuticals, traded on the NASDAQ under ARDS. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much, Phillip. It was a great conversation to have with you, and it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay.